She stepped into the boutique wearing a plain cotton sundress and comfortable flats, her hair loosely tied back, no makeup, no jewelry. The air inside the store was thick with a curated blend of floral perfumes, soft jazz playing overhead, and the quiet hush of whispered compliments about $5,000 shoes. It was the sort of place where even the walls looked expensive, painted in soft neutrals with gold trim and delicate lighting that made every product shimmer. The boutique was known across the city as the destination for exclusivity, refinement, and taste. But it was also known for its unspoken rules about who belonged and, more importantly, who did not. As she walked in, she paused at a display of handbags arranged like museum pieces. Her eyes landed on a deep burgundy tote made of soft Italian leather, its seams hand-stitched and perfectly aligned. It was the kind of item that her best friend, who was retiring after 35 years as a public school teacher, would adore. But before her fingers could even graze the leather, a sharply dressed woman approached. "Ma'am," she began, voice tinged with forced warmth, "those bags are part of our signature line." She stood tall in heels that clicked authoritatively against the marble floor. Her blazer was pressed, and her expression was clearly one of skepticism. "We usually only show those pieces by appointment." The woman blinked once. "I was just admiring the craftsmanship," she said with a polite smile. "My friend appreciates handmade detail." The associate's smile grew tighter. "Of course, it is just, these pieces are quite exclusive. Our regular clientele often prefers a more discreet experience." The implication hung in the air like expensive perfume. At the register, another employee glanced over and whispered something to a coworker, both of them stifling a smirk. The woman remained calm. "I am aware of the price. That is not an issue." The associate tilted her head. "Even so, we recommend our clients make an appointment. Perhaps you would be more comfortable browsing some of our seasonal promotions instead." The tone was saccharine and polished, but the meaning was unmistakable. "Actually," the woman replied, still even-voiced, "I came in today with a specific purpose. My friend is retiring after a long and meaningful career, and I wanted to get her something memorable." The associate's smile thinned like ice. "Yes, well, sometimes what we want and what is appropriate do not always match, do they?" she said, her eyes moving deliberately over the woman's thrifted dress and worn leather flats. The manager appeared next, his expression neutral but disinterested. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, but his tone suggested he already believed it was not. "This guest was hoping to view our heritage collection," the associate said quickly, with just enough emphasis on the word guest to make the distinction. The manager's eyes barely concealed his skepticism. "Our heritage line is reserved for appointments, and our appointments are currently full." The woman stood motionless, absorbing the quiet humiliation as two nearby customers pretended not to listen. "I see," she said softly. "Well, thank you for your time." She turned and walked toward the door. As it closed behind her, the boutique returned to its curated calm. One of the employees snorted under her breath. "Some people just cannot take a hint." The following morning, at precisely 10:20, a gleaming black vehicle pulled up in front of the same boutique. It was the kind of car that did not just suggest wealth, it announced it. Long, sleek, and completely spotless, it reflected the rising sun in silent elegance. The vehicle idled for a moment before the driver, clad in a crisp uniform with white gloves, stepped out and opened the rear passenger door with mechanical precision. From the back seat emerged a tall man in an immaculately tailored navy blue suit, polished Oxfords, and the air of someone entirely used to being obeyed. His salt and pepper hair was brushed back, his posture crisp, and his stride purposeful. As he approached the boutique, the manager and staff looked on with instant alertness. The atmosphere shifted. Whatever morning boredom they had felt vanished like mist. The associate from the day before straightened her blazer and quickly made her way to the entrance, smiling brightly. "Welcome to Maison Elan," she said. "How may we assist you today?" The man looked around the boutique briefly before speaking. "Yesterday, my wife came in here," he said calmly. "She wore a cotton sundress and was inquiring about a bag from your heritage collection." The associate's smile faltered slightly. "I am sorry, sir. I do not believe we had any scheduled appointments yesterday for that line." "You are correct," he said. "She did not have an appointment. She walked in, and she was promptly dismissed. His voice was not raised, not angry, but there was a sharp edge in it that made the boutique fall silent. She was told, I believe, to try her luck somewhere more appropriate. The manager appeared beside the associate, trying to insert himself smoothly. Sir, I assure you, we strive to provide every guest with— No, the man cut in. You do not. What you provide is based on appearances, and what you denied was not just service, it was dignity. The words landed like weight. I am here to correct that. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and retrieved a neatly folded piece of paper. This is a list of purchases I would like to make today. The associate took the paper, her hands slightly trembling. You will notice 5 names, he continued. My wife, her friend, my personal assistant, our company's annual charity event, and a donation for the Children's Arts Foundation Gala. The manager's lips parted, speechless. Each recipient will receive an item from your premium line. That should come to 5 handbags, custom wrapped and delivered within 24 hours. He gave a measured pause. Unless, of course, you are fully booked. Silence. Then rapid agreement. Absolutely, sir, the associate said. We will take care of it personally. The man nodded. Good. Then he added, one more thing. The sale must be processed by the employee who did not turn my wife away. There was confusion. The one person, he clarified, who offered her a brochure, who at least tried. All heads turned toward a younger employee behind the counter. She looked stunned. Me? She asked. Yes, you. He smiled faintly. Let us begin. Inside the boutique, tension hung as thick as the scent of designer perfumes. Every movement carried weight now. The associate who had turned the woman away the day before hovered in the background, trying not to meet anyone's eyes. Clara, the junior employee who had offered only a brochure at the time, was now being guided through the sale of a lifetime. Her hands moved carefully, wrapping each Heritage Collection bag in layers of soft tissue, then sliding them into the boutique's iconic gift boxes, finishing with crisp black ribbons. She kept glancing at the man who had walked in with power but spoke with calm intention. He stood near the counter, observing everything, his posture relaxed, yet alert. There was no arrogance in him, only a sharp clarity. You handled this well, he said to Clara as she boxed the 3rd handbag. She looked up, slightly surprised. I was just doing my job, she said. He smiled, the kind of smile that meant more than politeness. That's rare and valuable. Across the boutique, the store manager stood frozen near the stockroom, pretending to scroll through something on a tablet but listening to every word. He was calculating the damage, not in lost merchandise, but in lost reputation. One sale was already enough to blow their weekly average out of the water, but it came laced with humiliation. The associate who had dismissed the man's wife finally stepped forward, speaking with carefully measured contrition. Sir, I'd like to extend my sincerest apologies for any misunderstanding that may have occurred yesterday. He turned his head slightly in her direction. It was not a misunderstanding, he said. It was judgment. You looked at a woman and decided she did not belong, and now you are apologizing because you were wrong about who she is. His tone did not rise, but it did not waver either. You should be apologizing regardless of her bank account. The associate flushed, her professional mask cracking. She opened her mouth to reply, but no words came. Clara, sensing the moment was not hers, quietly returned to wrapping the 4th box. As the final receipt printed and Clara clipped it neatly to the delivery forms, the man handed over a small stack of pre-written address cards, each one marked with a name and delivery preference. One was listed for his wife at their home, another for her friend at a downtown apartment complex. The 3rd was addressed to an assistant, the 4th to a nonprofit foundation, and the last to a city arts initiative for children. Clara glanced at the cards, then back at him. Would you like these hand-delivered? She asked. They are all within our delivery zone. He nodded. Yes, hand-delivered, and with care. He glanced again toward the back of the store. Perhaps not by just anyone. Clara nodded with understanding and made a small note in the system. Behind her, the manager finally found his voice. We will ensure everything is delivered with the highest standards, sir. The man said nothing in response. He did not need to. The weight of what had occurred was already pressing down on the boutique's once impervious atmosphere. The receipts, the boxes, the bags, all were just symbols now. What mattered was the lesson taking shape between the marble floors and the carefully curated shelves. The man tucked the pen into his jacket and turned back toward the boutique entrance. As he reached the glass doors, he stopped. "You said something to my wife yesterday," he said without turning back. "Something about people wanting things they cannot have. I hope you remember this moment every time you think that again." Then he stepped out into the sunlight. The chauffeur opened the rear passenger door with silent efficiency. As he slid into the back seat, he pulled out his phone and dialed. His wife answered after one ring. "That was fast," she said. "And efficient," he replied. The lesson landed. She was quiet for a moment. Then, with a tone both amused and warm, she asked, "Did you buy the bag?" "I bought all 5, he said, "and made sure the only person who treated you like a human got the credit." He could hear her smile through the phone. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic." He looked back at the boutique, now shrinking in the rear window. Not dramatic, just effective. The rest of the day at the boutique moved forward like a tightly wound clock suddenly jolted off rhythm. The manager held a brief, awkward staff meeting in the back room, trying to spin the morning's incident as an unexpected opportunity and not what it truly was, a public relations disaster waiting to happen. The associate who had insulted the man's wife remained visibly shaken, her confidence chipped away by a simple truth spoken with grace: that kindness matters more than assumptions, and that wealth does not wear a uniform. Clara, the young employee now processing the most significant sale of her short career, returned to her duties with quiet professionalism, though she was aware the entire staff was treating her differently now. Not with resentment, exactly, but with hesitation, as if her stock had risen and they had missed the opportunity to invest early. She received a call just after 2 in the afternoon from the courier service confirming that all 5 gift packages had been hand-delivered, exactly as requested. She thanked them, double-checked each record, and filed the documents away in a folder labeled Priority Clients. When she stood back up, she noticed her name had already been added to the whiteboard under the boutique's top sales column for the week. The number beside it was staggering, eclipsing most employees' monthly performance in a single day. Still, she said nothing. She did not gloat. She simply continued folding scarves, assisting customers, and treating each visitor with the same polite attention she had shown the woman in the sundress the day before. At the Collins residence that evening, sunlight filtered in through tall windows onto stone floors and bookshelves lined with worn classics. The woman, now wearing the same cotton dress she had worn to the boutique, sat on the porch with a mug of mint tea, her gaze resting on the garden beyond the railing. She had not spoken much about the incident to anyone besides her husband, and she had no desire to. She was used to invisibility in some places, used to being mistaken for the assistant, the event planner, the secretary. It rarely bothered her. What struck her this time was how easily people assumed their own superiority. She had walked into that boutique with genuine intent to bring joy to a friend, and had walked out reminded of just how much appearances still ruled the world. When the package arrived, delivered by hand, wrapped in soft ivory tissue and bound with the boutique's signature seal, she raised one eyebrow but said nothing. Her husband appeared in the doorway a moment later, holding a second package. "One for you, one for her," he said simply, "and 3 more, just for good measure." She opened hers slowly. Inside was the same burgundy leather bag she had admired, only this one had a small note stitched into the lining. "To the woman who knows what really matters." Her breath caught for a moment. "That is your doing," she murmured. Her husband shrugged. "Only the truth." The next few weeks unfolded quietly, but change had already begun. The boutique staff operated differently now. The manager enrolled the team in a series of training sessions focused on unconscious bias and service ethics. Clara was promoted to senior sales associate and given a spot on the boutique's upcoming brand retreat. Customers noticed a difference in how they were greeted. There was more warmth, more patience, more listening. And behind every polite smile was a flicker of awareness, a memory of a morning that had shaken their assumptions. Meanwhile, the Collins Foundation held its annual gala. The ballroom of the downtown hotel was transformed with white linens, golden candlelight, and the gentle buzz of conversation. Donors mingled with volunteers, musicians played soft classical pieces, and a slideshow of the foundation's work flickered on the screen behind the stage. Among the crowd, Clara moved carefully between tables, dressed in a simple black gown and carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She'd been invited not as a guest, but as a volunteer, an invitation extended directly from the Collins family with no pomp, no spectacle, just a quiet, handwritten note. She had accepted immediately. When she saw the woman in the blue silk gown, different from the cotton dress but unmistakably the same person, she paused for only a second before approaching. "You look wonderful tonight," Clara said. "So do you," the woman replied with a kind smile. "How are you liking the event?" "It is different from anything I have attended," Clara admitted, "but the people are kind, and the cause is important." The woman nodded. "It always is." As the evening progressed, Clara found herself moving with more confidence. The ballroom was filled with people whose names she did not know, but their warmth was genuine. She had expected glitz, expected showmanship, but what she saw instead were families, parents guiding children through photo exhibits, medical volunteers hugging young patients, and teachers thanking donors for funding art programs that public budgets had abandoned. The Collins Foundation had been built with purpose, and that purpose showed in the details. Everything was accessible. Every face was included. In the far corner of the room, a boy in a motorized wheelchair was demonstrating a prototype drawing tool developed by one of the Foundation's innovation grants. Guests gathered around him, clapping with admiration as he sketched perfect spirals with the help of a joystick and voice commands. Clara stood watching for several minutes, something in her chest tightening. She had worked in retail for most of her adult life. Her days were filled with luxury, but often devoid of meaning. Tonight was different. When she finally made her way back to the food tables, she found herself shoulder to shoulder with the woman again. "He is incredible," Clara said, nodding toward the boy. The woman's eyes followed her gaze. "That is Jonah. He was born with a rare muscular condition. He is also one of the sharpest kids I have ever met." She glanced back at Clara. "Your kindness helped fund that tool." Clara blinked. "Me?" The woman smiled. "That sale? The one with the bags?" "The final item went to a tech lab we sponsor. That drawing tool was what they built with the funds." Clara was quiet for a moment, absorbing it all. "I never imagined a handbag could do that." The woman's voice was gentle. "It is not about the bag. It is about intention, and how money moves when values guide it." Later that night, the event wound down as candles flickered low and families began gathering their things. Clara stepped outside into the hotel courtyard, needing air, needing a moment. She leaned on the railing and looked out at the small, decorative fountain in the center, its water lit from beneath and casting rippling patterns onto the stone. A moment later, the man appeared beside her, the same man from the boutique, the husband. His suit jacket was unbuttoned now, but his posture still carried that natural command. "You did well tonight," he said simply. Clara nodded. "I am still not sure how I ended up here." He looked at her for a long moment. "You did something most people in your position would not have done. You treated someone without power as if she mattered. That is all we ever look for when we build teams. Not polish, not pedigree, just decency." Clara felt the weight of those words settle into her chest. "Thank you," she said. "I will try to live up to that." "You already have," he replied, "but there is more to come." She looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" He handed her a folded envelope. Inside was an invitation, formal, elegant, and unmistakably real. The Collins Foundation was expanding a new initiative focused on community partnerships, and they were building a team to manage donations, community outreach, and product collaborations. The envelope had her name on it, not her position, not her title. Her name. Clara held it in her hands as if it might disappear. "Are you offering me a job?" she asked. "I am offering you a place where kindness has value," he said, "and where no one will ever be judged by their shoes." Clara laughed, half out of joy, half in disbelief. "I do not even know what to say." He gave her a soft smile. Say yes, then show up. He walked away quietly, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. Clara stood alone in the courtyard, holding the invitation close to her chest. Behind her, the gala glowed with warm lights and soft music. Ahead of her, something entirely new had opened. 2 months later, Clara walked through the glass doors of the Collins Foundation headquarters, not as a visitor, not as a volunteer, but as a full-time employee. It still felt slightly surreal. Her new workspace was modest, a desk in a sunlit open-plan room filled with community maps, grant binders, and handwritten thank you notes taped to cubicle walls. There were no luxury displays or curated lighting, just energy and purpose. On her first day, her new team welcomed her with genuine warmth. No one asked about what school she had attended, what designer she was wearing, or who had referred her. They asked what causes she was most passionate about, which projects she hoped to lead, and how she preferred her coffee. Clara dove into the work with the same diligence she had once used to wrap heritage handbags. Only now, her attention to detail meant organizing medical equipment shipments, planning sensory-friendly event logistics, and streamlining donor reports that would help fund classrooms for children with learning differences. The shift in her life felt like peeling back a heavy coat she had not realized she was wearing. Here, she was not selling aspiration. She was facilitating access, and that mattered. In her second week, she was placed on a project with direct oversight from Margaret herself, whose leadership style was as practical as it was compassionate. During their first meeting, Margaret asked every person to share one thing that had recently moved them. When it was Clara's turn, she hesitated, then quietly said, "A boy named Jonah, drawing spirals with a joystick at the gala." Margaret gave a small nod of recognition. "Jonah moves everyone," she said. "He reminds us that imagination always finds a way out." In the following days, Clara stayed late, eager to prove she belonged. She coordinated a shipment of adaptive tablets to rural libraries, managed a last-minute speaker cancellation for an inclusion summit, and calmly negotiated a tricky logistics issue with a manufacturer who had confused a shipment of orthotic shoes with classroom beanbags. It was exhausting, it was overwhelming, and it was exhilarating. One afternoon, while finalizing a brochure for an upcoming donation drive, Clara's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She picked up, expecting a vendor or delivery confirmation, but it was the manager of the boutique. His voice was stiff, carefully neutral. "I heard about your new position," he said. "Quite a leap." Clara paused, unsure whether to respond with civility or honesty. "Yes, it's been an amazing opportunity," she finally said. There was a long silence on the line. Then he added, "We've been reviewing things at the boutique, updating how we train staff, looking at how we assess customers." His tone tried to strike balance, an apology wrapped in formality. Clara waited. He continued, "It was never meant to be personal, but I suppose it was." Clara nodded, unseen. "People remember how you make them feel," she said softly. "That's always personal." He thanked her and hung up. She stared at her phone for a long moment, then slid it into her drawer and turned her attention back to the brochure. That Saturday, Margaret invited Clara to visit one of the foundation's partner sites in the East End, a neighborhood often overlooked in policy meetings and investment budgets. The center was small but buzzing with life. Murals painted by school children covered the walls, ceiling fans spun lazily overhead, and the sound of piano chords drifted from the multi-purpose room where children were rehearsing for their first adaptive music recital. Clara stood next to Margaret as the children, some with wheelchairs, others with braces or sensory tools, performed with glee, their voices loud, their joy louder. A boy named Jalen, in a leg brace, sang solo with a wide grin and afterward told Clara, "Singing makes my legs forget they are different." Clara smiled and ruffled his hair. "You just reminded me why this work matters." After the performance, a mother pulled Margaret aside and wept openly. "You saw my son when no one else did. You made him feel like he mattered." Margaret embraced her. "He has always mattered. You just needed a stage for others to see it." That night, Clara sat in her small apartment with a notepad in hand, writing down all the moments she never wanted to forget. Jonah's spirals, Jalen's voice, the thank you note from the teacher in rural Dakota who received 25 adaptive desks, The look on Margaret's face when children ran to her instead of away from medical equipment. She flipped back to the beginning of the notebook where she had written her goals on her first day. Listen more. Assume nothing. See people fully. They were no longer goals. They were daily practices. And for the first time in her life, Clara no longer wondered what she was meant to do. She was already doing it. 3 months after joining the Collins Foundation, Clara found herself standing behind a podium at the organization's annual partner celebration. It was a modest event compared to the high society galas hosted by major city philanthropies, but the room pulsed with authenticity. Volunteers, educators, therapists, and families filled the hall. Clara had been asked to give a short speech reflecting on her journey from boutique sales associate to outreach coordinator, and she had nearly declined. Public speaking was not her comfort zone, but Margaret had insisted. "Your story is exactly what people need to hear," she had said. So here she was, palms slightly damp, index cards in hand, looking out at a sea of expectant faces. She began with a simple line. "I used to sell things that were designed to be exclusive. Now I build programs that are meant to include." The room fell silent in the best way. She told them about the woman who walked into the boutique in a cotton dress, about the judgment she faced, and about the silent shame Clara had felt being unable to stop it. She talked about the man who returned the next day not with anger, but with purpose, and the moment her entire outlook on people, work, and worth began to shift. "When someone believes in you," she said, "you begin to believe in yourself, and then suddenly, your work has a heartbeat." When she finished, there was no roaring applause, only a rising wave of warmth, people standing, nodding, some wiping away tears. Margaret met her at the edge of the stage, embracing her without a word. She did not need to speak. The message had landed. Later that evening, as the last of the guests filtered out, Clara stepped outside onto the building's steps and exhaled deeply. The sky above was a deep indigo, stars just beginning to appear. She pulled her sweater tight and stared up at them, unsure of whether she felt more exhausted or fulfilled. Maybe both. Behind her, she heard a familiar voice. "You did well," said Alexander Collins, his voice carrying that same calm gravity it always had. Clara smiled. "Thank you. I'm still shaking a little." He nodded. "That's how you know it mattered." They stood together in silence for a moment, the night air cool and clean. "Do you remember what I told you in the courtyard?" he asked. Clara nodded. "That you were offering me a place where kindness had value." He looked at her with quiet pride. "You've proven it does." Just then, the doors behind them swung open, and Margaret stepped outside, her heels clicking softly against the stone. She joined them, her face glowing with the kind of tired joy that comes from a job well done. "I think next year, we let Clara run the whole thing," she joked. Clara laughed. "Not without help." Margaret tilted her head. "Help always finds people who work with heart." They stood there, the three of them, without ceremony, without cameras, just watching the parking lot empty as the event faded into memory. But something had solidified in that moment. Clara had not just changed her job, she had changed her place in the world. She had stepped out of a store built on exclusion and walked into a life built on impact. The following week, the boutique across town launched a rebranding campaign. Gone were the sleek marble ads with impossibly thin models and price tags hidden behind call for pricing signs. Instead, the new window display featured a series of portraits. Real customers from a variety of backgrounds, smiling, laughing, standing with family, with mobility aids, with handwritten quotes about why fashion should be accessible. Clara passed by the storefront one morning on her way to a local donation pickup. She stopped and studied the window. It was beautifully done, genuine. A small plaque beneath the main display read, "We once got it wrong. We now choose to see everyone." She stood there for a moment, letting the words settle, and then continued walking. A few steps down the street, she saw a woman standing at a bus stop wearing a familiar cotton dress, though not the same one. It was a different woman entirely, but the scene echoed. The woman was flipping through a job application packet, her brow furrowed in concentration. Clara considered saying something, some small word of encouragement, but decided not to interrupt. Instead, she smiled as she passed and made a silent wish that the next door the woman walked through would open in kindness. That afternoon, Clara returned to her office to find a letter waiting on her desk. It was from a teacher in a small mountain town, thanking her for the set of adaptive desks that had arrived just in time for the new semester. The note was written in blue ink, each letter carefully formed, likely by a student. At the bottom, a child had drawn a stick figure holding a crayon with the words, "Now I can write just like the others." Clara folded the letter slowly, her chest tightening. This, she thought, this was what a job should feel like. She pinned the note to the wall beside her desk above a growing collage of reminders, photographs, ribbons, student artwork, and one boutique brochure she kept not for bitterness, but for memory. It served as proof of where she had come from and why she would never go back. A few weeks later, Clara sat on a folding chair beneath a canopy at a park dedication ceremony hosted by the Collins Foundation. The sun was gentle, filtered through the leaves of tall trees that lined the freshly paved walking path, and the air was filled with the sound of children laughing nearby as they explored new playground equipment designed with inclusive use in mind. Wheelchair-accessible swings, low-rise climbing structures, tactile art installations, all funded through the Foundation's seasonal community grant. The crowd was modest but lively. Parents chatted in lawn chairs, therapists handed out pamphlets, and local reporters milled about with cameras. Clara had helped coordinate the entire event, from the ribbon color to the refreshments, and she watched with quiet satisfaction as everything unfolded smoothly. Near the platform, Margaret stood speaking with a small circle of local officials, her body language relaxed, confident. Clara could see that they listened to her, not out of courtesy, but out of genuine respect. She had become something few people managed to become without asking for it, revered by her deeds, not her demands. A young girl with braces on both legs approached Clara holding a plastic cup of lemonade and a flower she had picked from the grass. "Are you the lady who made the slide possible?" she asked. Clara smiled. "Not just me, a whole team helped." The girl nodded seriously, as if filing that away for future use. "Well, thank you. It does not hurt my legs when I go down it, and the bottom is soft." Clara leaned forward. "That's because someone listened when you said it used to hurt." The girl gave a small, satisfied shrug. "I told a lot of people. You were the first one who wrote it down." Clara felt a lump form in her throat, but kept her expression light. "Then I hope you slide 100 more times." The girl grinned and ran back toward the equipment, her flowers still clutched in one hand, lemonade forgotten in the other. As the ceremony began, Clara joined the others near the stage where Alexander was about to speak. He addressed the crowd with his signature calm, measured, direct, never showy. "We do not build parks for photo ops," he said. "We build parks because all children deserve to move without pain, without fear, and without waiting for someone to notice them." Applause rippled across the grass. Clara stood near the side, not seeking attention, just listening. When the speech ended and the ribbon was cut, the children surged forward, claiming the space with the ownership that comes only from those who have been long excluded. Wheelchairs rolled across smooth paths. A boy with hearing aids used sign language to narrate the slide experience to a group of volunteers. A girl with autism flapped her hands joyfully while spinning in a textured tunnel. For once, there were no awkward explanations, no apologies, just play. Margaret stepped up beside Clara and passed her a bottle of water. "I heard you spoke to City Development last week," she said. "Yes, they're interested in replicating the design in 3 other neighborhoods." Margaret raised her eyebrows. 3? That's fast." Clara gave a modest shrug. "Turns out city officials listen when you show them blueprints with built-in dignity." Margaret smiled. "You found your voice." Clara looked out at the children. "I think I just borrowed theirs." They stood together for a while, watching the park come alive in ways the blueprints had only hinted at. Alexander joined them briefly, passing along a quick update about incoming grant approvals, then excused himself to speak with a state representative. Clara watched him disappear into the crowd, grateful for the quiet kind of leadership that he and Margaret offered, never loud, always present. Later that afternoon, Clara returned to Foundation headquarters, where she met with her small team to finalize the calendar for the upcoming Accessibility Innovation Fair. They worked in easy harmony now, bouncing ideas off one another, dividing tasks, and moving with shared rhythm. The office was filled with small signs of ongoing work, charts with scribbled goals, mood boards for inclusive event themes, and half-packed boxes of tactile books for donation. Clara glanced at the whiteboard behind her desk and smiled at a sticky note someone had posted anonymously weeks ago. It read, "You see people." 4 simple words, and yet the truest reflection of the work she was trying to do. That evening, as she left the building, she passed by Margaret in the lobby, who was speaking with a man in a worn suit and heavy expression. Clara offered a quiet wave and continued out the doors, not realizing until later that the man had been a new applicant for the Foundation's Job Readiness Program. A week after the park ceremony, Clara received a small envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a short note, handwritten in careful cursive. "My daughter sleeps with the flower under her pillow. She told me the slide felt like flying. I never thought I'd see her run again. Thank you." There was no signature, no explanation, just a small pressed blossom folded between the pages. Clara sat at her kitchen table holding it in her hands for a long time. She thought of all the days she had spent greeting customers whose only goal was to be seen in the right store, wearing the right brand, exiting with the right bag. And then she thought of that little girl, determined to enjoy her slide in a cotton dress with no audience but the sky. That was the difference. One world built on appearance, the other on experience. One measured by status, the other by softness at the bottom of a slide. She got up, placed the flower in her desk journal, and wrote a single line beneath it. "It only takes one person to make someone feel like they belong." 1 month later, Clara found herself back in the same part of town where everything had started. She had come for a donor lunch at a nearby restaurant, and on her way out, she passed the boutique. The display window had changed again. Now it featured mannequins of different sizes, skin tones, and ages, arranged beneath a bold vinyl sign that read, "Everyone is worthy of beauty." Clara paused, not out of nostalgia, but out of quiet recognition. She watched as a young woman in scrubs entered the store, clearly on her break. No one stopped her. No one redirected her to the sale rack. Instead, the greeter smiled and offered her water. Clara blinked. It was a small thing, maybe, but it told her that the lesson had not faded. Someone had learned something. As she stood watching, the boutique manager stepped outside, likely returning from a call. Their eyes met. His expression changed. Hesitation, then respect. "Clara," he said, stepping forward. "I wasn't sure it was you." She nodded. "Just passing by." He looked back at the boutique, then down at the sidewalk. "Things are different now. We had a lot to reevaluate." "Good," Clara said simply. "People deserve better." He hesitated, then added, "That day, I was so sure I was right, that I could tell who mattered just by looking." "And now?" she asked. "Now I look differently," he said. "And I ask differently." She gave a small nod, accepting the words, but not lingering in them. "Take care," she said, and turned to leave. He did not stop her. He simply watched her go, the woman he once overlooked now walking away with unshakable purpose. That evening, back at her apartment, Clara pulled open the drawer where she kept her earliest journal entries from the Foundation. She read over the old pages, her scribbled thoughts on the gala, the courtyard conversation with Alexander, the night she first stood on stage and said aloud what she once only whispered to herself. That kindness was not a skill, but a choice. At the back of the notebook was a loose page with 5 names written in neat columns, the recipients of the boutique bags from that unforgettable day. Next to each name, Clara had added notes over time. Margaret's friend gifted her bag at retirement lunch. Assistant donated hers to a silent auction. And then, Clara handled the sale. Clara stayed present. Clara learned. She smiled, not at the ego of it, but at the growth. The version of herself who once handed out brochures from behind a marble counter had become the person leading community coalitions, writing inclusive policy drafts and making children feel like lightning on a dance floor. She placed the notebook back in the drawer and stood up, walking to the kitchen to begin packing tomorrow's lunch for a training session with school counselors. There would be questions to answer, plans to finalize, and a dozen faces looking to her for direction. It still surprised her sometimes that people looked to her now, not for product suggestions, but for guidance, for empathy, for leadership. Across town in the Collins residence, Margaret and Alexander sat together in their library, sipping herbal tea and reviewing the latest foundation reports. A framed photo of the park opening sat on the mantel, Margaret standing next to Clara, both of them smiling, surrounded by children mid-laugh. Alexander looked up from his report and said, "She has become the kind of leader I hoped we would inspire." Margaret nodded, setting down her tea. She became the kind of leader the world needs, one who listens first. Alexander leaned back, a rare softness crossing his usually firm features. "She reminds me of you." Margaret chuckled. "Then we're in good hands." That night, as they prepared for bed, Margaret scrolled through her messages and saw one from Clara, sent just before dinner. It was a simple photo, a drawing by a child named Jalen, featuring a smiling stick figure with the caption, "Miss Clara is my favorite grown-up." Margaret stared at it for a long moment, then smiled, her heart full. A week later, the foundation hosted a small roundtable with community leaders and youth program participants. Clara opened the session with a story, not about donations or projects, but about a woman in a cotton dress who walked into a store one morning looking for a gift and instead found a wall of judgment. "I did not know her name then," Clara said. "I just knew she was treated like she didn't belong. But she did. She always did. We all do." Around the table, heads nodded slowly. A young girl raised her hand. "What happened to the people who were mean to her?" she asked. Clara thought for a moment. "They learned," she said, "and then they had a choice, to stay the same or to change. Some changed. Some are still trying." Another hand went up. "What happened to the lady?" Clara smiled. "She built something better." Afterward, as the group broke off into project teams, Clara stepped aside and stared out the community center window. Outside, parents gathered, teens organized folding chairs, and a little boy balanced a balloon on his head like a crown. The world was still imperfect, still layered with bias, inequality, assumption. But there were cracks in it now, cracks wide enough for light to shine through. Clara walked outside and helped a volunteer stack signs for the next event. As she carried them to the storage room, she caught a glimpse of herself in a passing mirror. The reflection startled her, not because she looked different, but because she looked complete, comfortable, true. Sometimes people believe wealth is loud, that it moves in polished shoes and speaks in branded tones. But Clara had learned that the truest wealth lives quietly. It listens before it speaks. It opens doors without waiting for applause. It sees a woman in a cotton dress and says, "Yes, you belong here, not because of what you wear, but because you are here at all." That is the kind of wealth that cannot be boxed or branded. The kind that makes a child feel like lightning on a playground. The kind that turns judgment into grace. The kind that builds a life. So if this story moved you, join us. Subscribe for more stories that show the truth behind the surface. And in the comments below, tell us, have you ever been underestimated, or have you ever misjudged someone who later surprised you? Your story could be the reminder someone else needs. Because at the end of the day, the real question is not what someone looks like when they walk through the door. The real question is, how do we treat them before we know who they are?